What is up, and welcome back to The Haunted Beard. My name is Jake. Well, I have been making my way through the Scream series, and today I'm here to talk about Scream 3. There it is right there. So let's get into it. This film came out in 2000, 3 years after the previous Scream, also directed by Wes Craven. And this film sees Sidney Prescott, who's now pretty much in like a witness protection style thing. She's kind of hiding out in the woods in isolation alone when a new Ghostface killer emerges now in Hollywood on the set of Stab 3. And because of that, it calls Sidney back in because pictures of her mother start showing up at the murder scenes. And so she gets back in involved. And once again, we have got to figure out who the masked killer is. Overall, this film is kind of a mixed bag. It doesn't really hit any super high highs, but also doesn't really drop down too low at all. It kind of floats pretty nice, calm, smoothly, right kind of in that even sort of level, where there is some stuff about this that I like. There's some stuff that it doesn't work super great, but it's not super egregiously offensively bad or anything like that. So it just kind of maintains a nice sort of steady line through it all. You're not going to get anything here that sort of blows you away, but you're not going to get anything here that causes you to want to, throw your popcorn at the screen kind of thing either. Like I always do, let's talk about the opening scene. The opening scene here is handled a little bit differently than the previous two films, where those were kind of mostly sort of a single location, where this sort of cuts back and forth between two locations. Cotton Weary gets a call from his girlfriend at home saying that something is wrong, and he is speeding through traffic trying to get there. And we kind of get this cool sort of dynamic, sort of cross-cutting, cross-editing between sort of this fast-paced, kind of really intense sort of thing of Cotton Weary sort of, driving through traffic, going crazy to just really try to get home, and then a little bit more of the slow-paced, slow build as Ghostface is at his house stalking his girlfriend. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic there. I kind of like the cross-cutting, as I mentioned. I think it works pretty well. This one holds, I guess, a little bit more weight, just because in the first film, we didn't know who Drew Barrymore was. She was a brand new character. Same with the second film. They were brand new characters. This one, though, Cotton Weary is already a pre-established character. So this one kind of has, I guess, a little bit more impact just from a character perspective. So it works pretty good. I like it overall. Aspects of this film that I like and I think work the best are, I like the kind of the Hollywood backlot studio feel to it. So just sort of the whole kind of the production design and everything like that. Just me as a movie lover, I just kind of like that whole setting. It's cool that while they're not technically in Woodsboro, you still sort of get the Woodsboro vibes because of the set that they've constructed. There's also a really good sequence, maybe the best sequence of the film, where Sidney gets attacked by Ghostface on the backstage lot of the set of Woodsboro. And she's, traveling all throughout the sets. Just a really cool scene. They kind of make use of just sort of the artificial set design. There's a part where she opens a door and it just opens up into nothing. It's just kind of a cool moment. And overall, just a pretty solid sequence that I think is one of the highlights of the movie. The new characters in the film are a bit hit or miss. I think the best one is Parker Posey, who plays the Gale Weathers character in the movie within the movie in Stab 3. Her character's intentionally annoying, but it works pretty well. The best sort of aspect of her is just kind of her dynamic and banter back and forth between her and the actual Gale Weathers, obviously Courtney Cox, but there's some pretty good scenes there. I think her performance is pretty solid. I wish they would have used Dion Richmond's character a little bit more. He's given, I think, the best and funniest line in the entire movie early on when the set of Stab 3 find out that there is a murder victim, and he says he thinks it's probably some psycho fan who's pissed off that they killed Randy in Stab 2. And I was like, hey, that's me. That sounds like me. But anyways, he had some potential, I think, for some good sort of, comedic value, but they just didn't quite use him as much as I wish they would have. Emily Mortimer's character, who she plays Sidney in the movie within the movie, she's kind of a mystery to me. I didn't really, her character is just kind of awkward and strange, and maybe that's intentional. She just kind of threw me off every time she was on screen. Like, I couldn't really get a read for her, like if that's how her character was supposed to be, or if, I don't know, it was just kind of kind of an awkward performance, I guess. And then obviously the detective played by Patrick Dempsey. He's fine. I don't really love him. I don't hate him. He's just fine overall. Another quick thing that's kind of a mixed element to this movie is the new sort of voice distorter that Ghostface uses. And it works in a way because it's kind of cool that he can completely change and disguise his voice as a totally different person. And so you think you're talking to Sidney Prescott, but you're talking to Ghostface, right? And so kind of adds a nice sort of mystery element. But it's kind of mixed because it obviously you have to stretch believability pretty far. And so if that's something that's just, too over the top for you, and it is, I mean, it's obviously completely ridiculous, but and so it's a bit mixed for me. I also like the central mystery of the film. I think it works pretty well. The new Ghostface leaving pictures of Maureen Prescott, Sidney's mother, at the location of each murder scene. I had only seen Scream 3 once before this viewing, and it had been years and years ago, so I didn't remember it super well. And so, in a way, there are kind of parts of it that almost felt like I was watching it for the first time. So, I thought the central mystery, whodunit aspect works pretty well. It kind of brings in some more, I guess, significant kind of investigative detective work where they have to, look at her images and they're able to find the location and they go track down. There's a cool cameo scene with Carrie Fisher because they find out that Maureen Prescott was actually an actress for a couple years, and so then there's connections to the higher ups and so there's just kind of a little bit more of a detective investigative kind of feel to the mystery element of the movie that I enjoyed. Now the mystery ultimately leads them to sort of this high-powered producer played by Lance Henriksen, and it's kind of revealed that there was a bit of a history, relationship, kind of connection between him and Maureen Prescott when she tried to become an actor. And knowing what we know now and watching this film today, and this scene specifically, this scene is now the most disturbing scene of the entire film, unintentionally, right? Because of who, produced this film. So this scene just kind of, it sort of feels weird and kind of gross, and I don't even really know what words to use, but it's just kind of an odd aspect to this film now, considering, again, who produced it and what happened with all that, and that you get this type of scene in this movie. It's just a little strange. I feel like the film is kind of lacking a little bit in the meta aspect, at least compared to the first two. There is still that to a degree where you've got the film within the film, and then, the characters, and then the characters from the film within the film. I feel like it's kind of lacking a little bit on the movie references too. Obviously, that's in large part due to sort of the absence of Randy. Obviously, we get sort of his cameo scene. And I like the scene here where he kind of, explains the rules of the trilogy and how, nobody's safe in the trilogy, and you kind of got to go back to the beginning, and there's something you're missing and all that. And so I like that. The scene doesn't really flow organically. It definitely kind of feels almost sort of forced and injected in the film. So I like it in a way, and in another way, it doesn't totally work. There's like this 8 to 10 minute sequence in this film where I feel like the tone kind of drastically shifts in a way. Now, obviously, there's always been a bit of a comedic element to this, but there's a scene where Patrick Warburton's character gets killed, and you've got Gail, Dewey, the movie Gail, and the movie Sidney, and one other character all in the house kind of freaking out because Ghostface is there. And then they end up escaping the house, and the house blows up. And then they start tumbling down this hill, and it's just this whole scene. It has just this very sort of goofy, silly, almost kind of slapstick sort of vibe to it. It's just a very silly sort of sequence where, again, they're all tumbling down this hill, and then, Dewey gets up and starts shooting at Ghostface, and then he slips and falls and tumbles down the hill again, and it's just kind of a really, it's just tonally kind of a really weird scene that almost kind of feels out of place in its execution. I will say, though, that I think the final act of the movie is pretty good, pretty well executed. The final reveal that the new Ghostface killer is Sidney's long-lost brother is, I think, a little bit predictable in terms of that it's her brother. necessarily specifically who the killer is. So I think they're able to hide the actual identity of the killer fairly well. I have fun with the whole sequence with Gale and Dewey fighting Ghostface, and he captures them, ends up calling Sydney, and she comes in. And I think this is kind of the best example so far where we really get to see Sydney Prescott kind of in full force. We really get to see how smart she is, right? Packing an extra gun, wearing the bulletproof vest, and she kind of does her most butt kicking in this. You kind of get really sort of a major lengthy sequence of her and Ghostface really going at it and fighting and beating each other up. So I think there's a pretty good amount of fun to be had here with the final act and watching Sydney Prescott do her thing and take it to Ghostface. So it's pretty good. Overall, I have a decent enough time with this. You know, it's a fun enough ride. I don't really have strong opinions one way or the other. It's just kind of a, you know, a decent enough kind of middle of the road sort of thing. One thing that I felt a little bit with watching this now being the third film is that obviously the first film kind of set up, it was, you know, kind of sort of deconstructing the slasher genre. And now with the third installment in this franchise, you can kind of feel that even now Scream sort of kind of has a bit of a formula to it. It starts feeling a little bit formulaic, and it's kind of almost becoming in a way the very thing it was kind of deconstructing or critiquing. And so, like I said, I have a fun enough time with this. I like the world, I like the mystery, I like the main characters well enough that I can, you know, put this in and enjoy it for the most part. It's probably like a, you know, maybe a 5.56 possibly out of 10 for me. So those are my thoughts on Scream 3. Next up, we are continuing right along Scream 4, and we will see you then on The Haunted Beard.